2025. What a year 2025 has been. I don't normally do these kind of prediction videos, mostly, to be honest, because I think they're they're just a bit clickbaity, aren't they? But I think really to understand where we're going into 2026, we need to have a bit of an understanding about where we've come from. So I'm guessing you're probably watching this because you're a planning consultant, an architect, maybe doing a self-build, embarking on your first project. And as the owner of an arboricultural and ecological consultancy, this year has been really, really tough. It's been impossible to plan. It's been impossible to look forwards with any sort of real vigour. And the reason for that is because the lovely government, and this isn't about politics, but the lovely government just keeps throwing things at us. There's a few things that I'll come on to as we go through this video, but I think it is important just to understand just how disruptive the government have been over the last 7 or 8 months, all under the guise of pushing forwards. That's what they keep telling us. They keep saying that they're going to push forwards. So, what's changing? What are my top few predictions for 2026? What are the things that you need to think about as we move forwards into 2026? Well, we've looked back. I'm done with that. The first thing that we need to talk about is this one, and it is BS 5837. And BS 5837 is all about trees. So this is the British standard that originally was created in 2010. It was updated in 2012, and pretty much absolutely nothing has happened since then. And the reason that they started to look at updating BS 5837 is because we have a better understanding now of how trees interact with the built environment and what level of surveys are going to be required moving forwards. So they thought, do you know what, we're going to update the British standard. Great idea. The only problem is it keeps getting pushed back and back and back. It's also linked to biodiversity net gain because, and we'll come on to that later, but one of the things that BNG looks at is the quality of the trees on site, and it didn't really, in any real detail, look properly at veteran trees. So the new BS 5837 is coming out next year. It's going to look at veteran trees in a lot more detail, but more importantly, it's going to bring in a code of practice, and that's going to be absolutely fantastic for you, the clients, when you're looking to procure these services, because you're going to know exactly what it is you require. So our first prediction, and it is a prediction because it might not happen, our first prediction is that BS 5837 will be released. Okay? And we're going to get information on veteran trees, we're going to get information on a code of practice, and they're also, and this is really important, they're going to increase the measurement of the root protection area around the tree. And by increasing the measurement of the root protection area around the tree, it means that you might have less area to develop. So it's absolutely crucial you get those tree surveys carried out early on. When's it coming, Matt? That's what I hear you asking. They're talking about November 2026. It was originally coming out in 2025. Now they're talking about November 2026. My personal opinion is it will come a little bit earlier than that, and it's going to get tied to BNG. What's next? What is next is the dreaded P&I bill. So, we'll put a sad face. So this is the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. So this was Rachel Reeves's grand gesture at speeding up development in the UK. And the reason that she wants to speed up development in the UK is because it helps grow the economy. We'll forget about all the other things that they're doing to shrink the economy. But in terms of development, they thought, well, we'll have a look at the existing system. And we realised that actually, do you know what? it's not working particularly well, and I think we all know that. We run a very pragmatic consultancy. We realise that development is going to go ahead regardless of what we say or what we do. So we try and work with our clients to find a pragmatic way through the mire. And you know, a lot of people don't work like that, and it creates friction and it creates tension. That coupled with some particularly damaging news stories around bat tunnels and HS2 and all that sort of stuff, the government thought, you know what, we need to do something about this. So they raised this planning and infrastructure bill, and if you get my weekly emails, I've been talking about this an awful lot over the last 6 months or so. So it went to the Houses of Parliament, it went to the Lords, it went to the Houses of Parliament, it was amended, it went to the House of Lords, and now it's passed through and it's going for royal assent and it will be coming into law. So what is going to change with the planning and infrastructure bill? Well, as things stand at the moment, the key thing when it comes to ecological consultancy and arboricultural consultancy is mitigation. Okay, so we have this thing called the mitigation hierarchy. I can't spell hierarchy. We have this thing called the mitigation hierarchy. And what this essentially means is that there are various different stages we have to go through when we're assessing habitats and species on your site to see whether we can avoid damaging them, whether we can mitigate damaging them, or whether we can avoid it altogether. Now, the government, through the P&I bill, is basically saying that they're going to do away with that and they're going to move to something called EDPs. And these are environmental delivery plans. Environmental delivery plans at the moment are only applicable in England. If your site is in Scotland or Wales, you don't have to worry about this just yet. Oh, that's my computer in the background. So what is an environmental delivery plan? Good question. So at the moment, let's say this is Hampshire, okay? And let's say we could have somebody over here building something, we could have somebody over here building something, we could have somebody over here building something, and all of their constraints are dealt with on a site-by-site basis. So if they've got bats, if they've got newts, if they've got trees and hedgerows, if they've got priority habitats, whatever, the mitigation and the surveys are all done on a site-by-site basis. What an environmental delivery plan is going to do is an EDP will cover a particular area. So think major infrastructure projects like HS2. There will be an EDP that covers all of that, and basically what it means is it's going to be pay to play. Okay, so developers will be asked to contribute to something called a Nature Recovery Fund, or an NRF, and all this comes down to is money. We don't know yet how this is going to play out, but that is the second thing that you need to be aware of. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill is passing into law in the early part of 2026, and it's going to be extremely disruptive for not just ecological consultancies and arboricultural consultancies. It's going to be extremely disruptive for everybody that wants to build anything. What's next? So that was 2, and that was the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. What's next? Well, tied to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, so the P&I bill and all legislation is set at a government level. The problem is that local planning authorities have their own local policy, which can be quite often at conflict with national policy. So guess what happens? Decisions get made based on local policy, and then it goes to appeal and it's thrown out. So there's going to be conflict between local and national policy. And guess what? It means that underfunded local planning authorities are going to have a lot more to deal with. So number 3, I'm going to put conflict. So there's going to be conflict between national and local policy. You can see it coming. In fact, there's probably going to be legal conflict there. So what does this all mean? It means that, when we come on to number 4, it means that local planning authorities are going to be massively overworked. They're already dramatically underfunded, and if we go right the way back to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, the reason for that, one of the reasons, the biggest blockers for development in the UK is underfunded local planning authorities. The money that they raise through the planning system doesn't go back into that department, it goes into the general coffers. I did a video on it with a former local planning authority officer whose name I can't remember. Kian might find it and stick it up here somewhere. But that chap was talking a lot of sense, and there's going to be enormous conflict and stress and overwhelm at local planning authorities. So number 4 is overworked LPAs. And you might think they're overworked now, but I can tell you now, it's going to get worse. So I can see what you're thinking. You're thinking, Matt, these predictions are, they're all pretty negative, aren't they? Well, there is one more. I have another one here that may be good for some of you. So for those of you that have been caught up in biodiversity net gain, which came in 2023, it means that your site after development has to have reached a 10% uplift in biodiversity value, and that's all done through a metric, through a spreadsheet. Okay, it's done through a metric, which is just a spreadsheet, and that's created by DEFRA, Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, who are also going to be pulling their hair out in 2026. So if you've been caught up on this, the concept of it is very good, okay? Should development leave the natural environment in a better place than it started? Yeah, absolutely, of course it should do. But if you've got a very small site, here is a very small site. There's a very small site, okay? And you're building, say it's an infill development, and you're building a house there. It doesn't take a genius to realise that you've taken away at least 50% of that site. So to get 10% uplift on what was there already is going to become extremely difficult, or it is extremely difficult. And what that's led to is an awful lot of frustration. So we're recording this at the moment in mid-December. We're going to try and get this video out before Christmas, and this may well have actually come to fruition. The government is proposing to remove the current exemptions. So the exemptions at the moment for BMG are if you are self-build, and that is genuinely you're building it to live in yourself, and they'll look to secure that through a Section 106 agreement or similar. The other exemption is if there is less than 25 square metres of habitat on site. So we interrupt this programming with a breaking news that, as predicted in the video that we only recorded yesterday that you are watching right now, the government has finally confirmed that there are going to be changes to the minimum exemption for BNG, and that sites below 0.2 hectares are going to be exempt. That's below 0.2 hectares are going to be exempt. We don't know yet whether that means habitat size or whether that means the size of the site. So who knows? The devil's in the detail, and that will be coming out in probably mid-2026, I would imagine. Let's get back to the video. Okay, if you meet those two exemptions, then you don't need to do a BNG assessment, even though some local planning authorities are asking you to prove that you don't need a BNG assessment by doing a BNG assessment. So what's happening? They are basically looking at moving the exemption to 0.5 hectares. So if your site is under 0.5 hectares, possibly there might be 9 residential units in there as well somewhere, you're going to be exempt from BNG. So great news for a lot of people, unless of course you're a developer that actually needs BNG, because what's going to happen is this is going to be massively disruptive to the fledgling habitat banking system that's been set up. And if you need off-site units for your scheme, you're not going to be able to get them. So what's happening now is the industry trade associations, wildlife trusts, ecologists are fighting to get it reduced to 0.1 hectares and some additional exemptions. So by the time this comes out, you'll probably find out what's going on. So I guess that's probably, it's going to be good for you guys, it's going to be bad for us, because once again we have spent tens and tens and tens of thousands of pounds upskilling our staff, teaching them GIS, spending hours and hours and hours getting to understand all these detailed manuals and documents to make sure that we can help our clients meet BNG, and then the government's going, do you know what, actually we're just going to rip that up. So BNG changes is at number 6. So the next thing that I'm going to speak to you about is BNG in Scotland. So the news is a metric is coming. In 2026, a metric is coming for Scotland. So I would expect by the middle of 2026, we are going to have a similar system to we've got in England now for BNG. So biodiversity enhancement is written into the National Planning Policy framework for Scotland. We're already starting to see customers being asked by local planning authorities to demonstrate a positive net gain using the English metric. They are developing a Scottish metric, and that is coming. So my 6th prediction for 2026 is BNG for Scotland. So you might want to think about your application, your development timeline, your land banking, and how you are going to put that all together. So those are my 6 predictions for 2026. BS 5837, tree surveys, new guidance is coming. It's going to improve things, make it a little bit more robust. No real big changes for developers. However, you want to consider that you put trees first, not last, and get those surveys boxed off early. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill is going to be extremely disruptive. There's going to be a lot of changes over the first 3 months of 2026, and we are not going to know what that looks like. Nobody's going to be able to give you any solid advice on that at the moment, which is going to make life very, very difficult. As a direct result of the P&I bill, we're going to get conflict between national and local planning authorities. So conflict between the government and local planning authorities as they fight to decide how they're going to make this work. We're going to see overworked local planning authorities. That situation is going to get worse. The P&I bill, could have made this much better. It's not. It's going to make it much, much worse. BNG changes should be announced before Christmas. We don't know what that's going to look like, but it's likely that the exemption is going to change and it's going to pull more and more sites out of mandatory BNG, which is probably a positive thing depending on how they do it. BNG for Scotland at number 6, that's coming. It's going to be here. It's going to be here soon. So, to wrap this bad boy up, what are my final thoughts? Well, I have a little saying, and I think this is going to become more and more relevant as we go into 2026, and that is survey plus design equals success. So as we roll into 2026, I would like you to consider just one thing. Survey plus design equals success, and if you need some support moving forwards to make sure your projects get off the ground and get the best chance they possibly can at planning, drop us a little message in the description below and we'll see if we can help you. Advice is free.